So, Lone Rider here, and I just got back from doing some repair work at a organized bicycle event here in New Jersey. I was basically the mechanic at one of the rest stops, and it was fun. I got to see a variety of bikes and a variety of people, and these type of things. They're pretty cool events. Um, Whether they're small or large, um, you know, it's great to see people on bikes. But one of the things I noticed is that a lot of the people didn't have spare inner tubes on them. In fact, a lot of them didn't seem to have anything except their bike, their helmet, and maybe one water bottle. And I don't blame them for this. They're novices. If you're a beginner, maybe riding a borrowed bike, you know, you're not going to have a toolkit with you unless the bike comes with it. But I'm not even talking about a full toolkit, like with a mini pump or one of those Allen key things, the mini tools, or other stuff. I'm talking about just having a spare tube in a bag under your seat or tucked in your jersey pocket. And the reason for that is if you do get a flat tire and you show up at the rest stop and the mechanic, me, is there to help you change the flat tire, to do it for you if necessary, if you can't do it yourself. Okay, I'll remove the punctured inner tube. What am I going to put in its place? Now, if you've never been to a organized bike ride that's not a race, such as the Five Borough Bike Tour or the Covered Bridges 100-kilometer ride in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, or anything in between, you might not be familiar with the fact that they do sometimes have mechanics at the rest stop. So there'll be places along the ride. If it's a short ride, maybe just one. If it's a longer ride, maybe several, where people can stop, where there'll be a bathroom, where there'll be people handing out bottles of water or cups of cider or whatever it is, snacks in some cases, food. And at least one of these rest stops, there'll usually be a mechanic to help you out. Now, what the mechanic is there for, he's got his portable bike stand, he's got his tools, he's got his pump, and most importantly, he's got his experience and his knowledge. What he doesn't have is an infinite number of parts that fit every ailment for your bike to just hand out for free. So he's literally there to fix things, but he has to have the raw material to fix things. So in my case, I was the mechanic. Somebody comes to me with a bike that has a flat tire, I look at it, I can take the old tube out, I can get ready to put the new one in. If there's no new tube, what happens? Well, I can remove your punctured inner tube, but if there's nothing to put in there, you've just discovered a new sport called hiking. Yeah. Now, to be fair, most of what I had to deal with was minor mechanical things, raising seats and adjusting some things like that there. And there were a couple people who had really low tires that I inflated, but nobody really had bad punctures except for this one guy. His tire, it was like completely blown out. Now here's the problem. Even if I had an inner tube, the reason it was blown out was because it was like dry rotted. There was a hole in the side where you could see little threads bulging out. Even if he had an inner tube and I was able to inflate the inner tube fully, it would blow out the tire. So even if he had a spare inner tube, I would have had to only inflate it like, halfway or maybe 2/3 of the way. And he'd be very lucky to not have another flat. Now, I guess this was kind of expected because it was basically somebody riding an old bike that they borrowed from somebody else. And the young fellow said to me, well, how was I supposed to know that I had to bring a spare tube? And in point of fact, how was he supposed to know? He's not an expert cyclist. He's new at this. Maybe he's never done it before. It's not even his bike that he's riding. He borrowed it from somebody for the occasion. If somebody doesn't own their own functional bicycle, it stands to reason that they're probably not an avid cyclist, so they won't know this sort of thing. Yeah. And rides like this, because they're a relatively safe, controlled environment, they do take place on open streets, but you're riding with a group of people. There's a rest stop. There's people there to help you. There's, you're not by yourself, etc. Um, and some of them do, like the Fireborough, take place on closed streets, even. So that's even a more safe environment, if you want to call it. The these rides tend to attract a lot of novices and a lot of people who are new to cycling or coming back to cycling after a hiatus. Now, what this means for the organizers is they have to remind these people of things that the experienced rider would take for granted. Now, rides that are put together by cycling organizations, I think Bike New York does the Five-Borough Bike Tour, or used to. I haven't done it in a while, so I'm not sure. And the Covered Bridges ride is organized by a cycling club in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And both of those groups make sure to remind people to bring spare inner tubes and stuff like that in case they get a flat. Generally, bike rides that are organized by cycling groups are really good at making that clear. Bike rides that are organized by other entities besides for cycling specific groups are usually less good about that. Maybe you have a ride to raise money for breast cancer, or an animal shelter, or to raise money for your local school, or it's just organized by as a community event by the town council or whatever. In a lot of cases, the people organizing the ride and planning it aren't going to be cyclists. So they're not going to think of these things. So they may not put anything in the flyers that go out or the emails that go out. Remember to bring an inner tube. They might say, remember to bring a helmet, because that's a liability and a safety thing. Very probably they're not going to remember to say anything about bringing an inner tube. Now, every organized bike ride I've ever been to, the mechanics have never had a full selection of spare inner tubes. But I've never needed them to, because I've always brought at least 2 spare tubes if I'm going on a long ride. And it's kind of important you bring your own, because there's different tire sizes. And then there's different valve types. Presta valves, which are narrow and made of metal. Schrader valves, which are like the valves you have in your car. Schrader valves are wider. So it's not just a question of does the inner tube fit the wheel diameter and tire width of your bicycle. It's a question of, is the valve going to fit through the hole in the rim? Because there's 2 different width valves, 2 different kinds of valves. And then you have the issue of rim geometry. If you've got a deep V or aero rim, a thicker rim, in other words, you're going to need a longer valve to fit all the way through that rim so that you can access the end to inflate it. Usually there's 2 or sometimes 3 types of valve stem lengths. So you'll have the regular, the medium, and the long. So you have, let's say, half a dozen different tire sizes on adult bikes at a minimum. I know there's more than that, but just for basic. And then you have really 12, because there's 2 different valve types. And then you multiply that times 3, because you have 3 different valve stem lengths. Now, it's really important that you actually bring an inner tube that'll fit your bike. In the old days, if you were just riding with a bunch of roadies and everybody had 700 by 23 tires on their road racing bike, you just say, hey, dude, I need a spare tube, and somebody will give one to you, because you're all riding the same size tires, more or less. Okay, one guy might be running 700 by 25. A 23 will stretch to fit that. But if you're riding a hybrid or a cyclocross bike with 32 millimeter tires, you're going to need a wider inner tube. If you have deep V rims and you need a size 3 valve, an extra long valve, yeah, you're going to need, either that or a valve extension so that you can even inflate the tire after you put the tube in there. These are things that to the average cyclist is just common sense. It's like zipping up your shorts after going to the bathroom. You know about this because you've been doing it all your life. You don't have to think about it. For the organizer who's not a cyclist, they might not know any of this. So it's important, if you're organizing a ride, I guess, get input from people who know. If you're a cyclist or even a non-cyclist, you're just starting out cycling, this is your first ride, whatever, you're a noob, Um, you know, it's not your fault if you don't know. But the organizers, if they're not cyclists, should go to the trouble to consult people who are and get input on what they should do. And so, just like they might remember to say wear your helmet, they should also remember to remind people to bring an inner tube that fits their bike. Now, should that be mandatory as part of the ride? Wearing a helmet may well be mandatory because of liability concerns. I don't think having a spare inner tube should be mandatory. I mean, that sounds kind of silly. However, it should be something that you put in the flyers or the emails or whatever to remind participants of the event, because a lot of them might be novices who might not know to bring one of those. So, yeah, what I observed today was that, you know, depending on which group of riders was in the parking lot at any moment at the rest stop, some had spare inner tubes under their seats, some didn't. I looked around after this guy had his puncture, thinking maybe we'll be able to, have somebody else give us an inner tube if they, you know, this near the end of the ride, maybe they can spare one. There were a lot of other people on hybrids with that size tire, 700 by 35 or whatever, 32. So I said, okay, somebody else, there's a lot of other people riding bikes with the exact same size tire and Schrader valves and the whole bit. So one of them must have a spare tube they haven't used yet. Maybe, it doesn't hurt to ask. So me and the other guy went around, and not a single of those bikes had I said, look for one with a pouch under the seat. We'll ask the guy if he can spare a tube. Not one of them had a pouch under the seat. Like literally, out of 24 people who were in the parking lot at the time, not one. Now, again, if you're a novice, it's not your fault. You don't know any better. Guess what, though? That's why it's important the organizers tell you. And if the organizers themselves are novices when it comes to cycling and they don't know any better, then ask someone who does. We're out here, okay? Now, maybe I should have made it clear at one point when they agreed to ask me to do this for the weekend. They said, "Are you bringing your own tools?" Maybe I should have said I'm bringing my own tools, but not my own part supplies. However, like I said, at every bike event I've ever been to, the mechanic doesn't supply the parts. You don't bring spare cables, spare cable housing, spare seats. I mean, just to use, this is a cheapo seat, but, some high-end road bike seats could cost $120. Am I just going to bring 6 of those and just give them out on a street corner? Think, McFly. So, I don't blame the novices for not having spare tubes. I totally get it. They don't know. But that's why it's important that somebody who does know tells the people who know. So if you're going on a ride like this, make sure you're prepared. If you're not sure what that entails, ask somebody. There will probably be a mechanic there with his tools, with his pump, and more importantly, with his know-how. But what he probably will not have is a spare inner tube to fit every tire size. So make sure you have one that fits your bike. Lone Rider, out.